When a giant crocodile shot out of the water in the direction of lone fisherman Dave Johnson, he was certain that today was going to be the day that H would meet his maker. But to his surprise, the crocodile did not attack him. Instead, it seemed to be wanting Dave to follow it. Did this animal need help with something? But before we start our story, smash the like button, make sure to subscribe, and hit the notifications bell so you won't miss any new stories. The whole scenario was just bizarre. But when Dave saw what the crocodile led him to, it all immediately made sense to him. Dave can't stop thinking to himself what a stupid decision he was making by following this crocodile deeper and deeper into the swamp. He should have just made a run for it towards his car when he had the chance. But then again, who knew how the giant croc would have reacted to that? But all these thoughts went to the back of Dave's head when the crocodile suddenly stopped moving and turned around in Dave's direction. His heart stopped. Did he just follow this animal right into its trap? But then Dave saw it. It now all made sense why the crocodile had brought him here. It needed his help, and it needed it as soon as possible. But where had the crocodile brought Dave? What did it need his help with, and would Dave actually be able to offer it? Everyone knew that Dave Johnson loved fishing more than anything, but few people understood the true reasons why. At 55 years old, he had started appreciating the quieter moments when he could just sit back and relax. And even though he adored his family, there was one thing Dave never wanted them to know. Dave worked long weeks to provide for his large family. He enjoyed his job and liked knowing that his family was secure, but he still had a bit of a secret that he kept to himself. Even though Dave loved fishing, part of the reason he liked it is because it allowed him to get away from his family and have some alone time. Dave didn't want anyone in his family to realize that he didn't want them to tag along, so he found a remote place to fish out in the forest where he knew his wife and children wouldn't want to join him. The small lake was gorgeous, and there was even a small fishing pier, but that didn't exactly make the place paradise. In Florida, the swamps could be dangerous. There were strange bugs and wild animals that could appear suddenly. But Dave wasn't too worried about the risks and dangers. After all, he'd learned a thing or two from being outdoors so much. Maybe he should have been more afraid after all. After fishing for many years, Dave had seen his fair share of critters and animals. He steered clear of crocodiles and other creatures, and they left him alone as well. It didn't seem like they were interested in being around him, but not everyone felt the same way as Dave. When the news started covering the recent rise in crocodile sightings in Dave's part of Florida, he didn't pay much attention. He figured that he would just avoid them like any other time he'd encountered a crocodile while he was fishing. But Dave's wife had something quite different to say about the situation. Dave's wife had tried to convince Dave not to go fishing anymore until the crocodiles weren't as common in the area. She even offered to let him have the living room to watch TV by himself if he just wanted to relax without anyone else around. Dave didn't listen to her concerns. That was his first mistake. Dave didn't want to spend the whole day cooped up in the house. He'd been planning his fishing trip for the whole week, and he refused to listen to what his wife had to say. Later, he would look back on that moment and wonder if that's where it all started to go wrong. Dave was confident in his skills as an outdoorsman. He trusted himself to be safe even if an animal threatened him. He didn't know much about crocodiles, but he knew enough to believe that there wouldn't be a problem. When it was time to leave, he slowly began packing up his gear, certain that nothing would go wrong. During the drive out to the lake, Dave had more time to think about what his wife had said and the situation with the crocodiles. He hadn't heard of anyone actually being injured, and he finally convinced himself that it was probably just the news making a big deal out of nothing. But he couldn't have been farther from the truth. Dave relaxed once he was parked. He gathered his gear and headed out to the pier to start getting his favorite fishing spot into order. He was so busy getting his lines ready and putting out his chair that he didn't even notice that something in the water was coming closer. Dave was thrilled to catch his first fish after only waiting for a few minutes. As he was reeling in his line from the side of the pier, he couldn't imagine his good luck. It never occurred to him that maybe the fish were by the pier because they were hiding, but from what? Just as Dave was celebrating his first catch of the day, the water churned behind him. He didn't even have time to turn around before an enormous creature jumped out of the water and scrabbed onto the pier. Dave froze in shock and wondered if that was going to be the last moment of his life. Dave squeezed his eyes shut as tightly as he could. He knew that he couldn't outswim a crocodile, and there was no way to fight it when he'd just fall in the water anyway. He just closed his eyes and tried to look as unthreatening as possible. But then nothing happened. Dave finally worked up the courage to open his eyes. The crocodile was right where it had landed, staring at him and waiting. It didn't look like it was getting ready to attack, but Dave knew that the animal could become aggressive at any time. He had to do something. There was a sliver of open pier next to the crocodile that was just big enough for 1 foot at a time. Dave thought he might be able to sneak by without touching the crocodile, but as soon as he tried to move, the crocodile responded, and what it did stopped Dave dead in his tracks. The crocodile let out a growling noise that made Dave freeze right where he stood. The crocodile didn't seem upset beyond that. It obviously wasn't going to let him leave, but it wasn't trying to attack him either. Dave had no idea what the animal wanted. Was it toying with him? Dave took a deep breath and studied the crocodile. He tried to clear his mind and look for some clues about what the animal was thinking. He wasn't sure what made him do it, but he slowly held out his hand to see how the crocodile would react. It almost seemed happy. Dave took a step forward with his hand out, and the crocodile seemed to move closer. He kept his hand out until the crocodile was close enough to touch. Slowly, he let his hand rest on the crocodile's nose. When Dave looked at the animal, it seemed like the crocodile was pleased. But then the crocodile started turning around. The crocodile started heading toward the shore at the end of the pier. Dave wondered if maybe it had been raised by people and wasn't afraid anymore. The crocodile finally paused to stare back at Dave. Even after a minute or two, it didn't look away. Did the crocodile expect him to tag along? When Dave hesitantly took a step forward, the crocodile walked away again toward the shore. Dave kept following, and the animal kept waiting for him before moving again. It seemed to be focused on some nearby vegetation. At the end of the pier, Dave saw his truck and knew he could run for it. But what was the crocodile trying to do? Dave decides to follow the crocodile, which eventually leads him to the baby who has been injured. Dave takes this baby croc to a vet who nurses him back to help, after which Dave returns the baby croc to his very thankful mother.